Hey, farming ain't easy. Thanks for watching. Check this out. We are doing something in the shop today that we've never done before. The wrenches are hung up, and our friend Brian Palachuk from Northstar Seeds here to go over some crop planting options and try to relieve my stress, because I'm kind of going crazy trying to figure out what we're going to grow this year in this drought.
Well, thanks, Dave, for having me out. It's always a pleasure to visit with our dealers and producers and talk about what may seem like a dry topic, crop planting, but it's fundamental in setting the stage for the rest of the year.
Well, it's a dry year, so let the trend continue.
That it is.
Stay tuned, guys. This will be fun to watch. Thanks again, Brian, for coming. We've been in talks for the last couple months, exploring some new opportunities. The reason we're spending a little more time on the crop planting topic this year is we need to tailor ourselves to some drought-resistant crops. We've tailored varieties and things before, but we are in an excessive drought, much like everybody. The world of agriculture right now is a funny place with the weather and everything going on, and well, our intention this year is to take that to the next level with some new varieties, some new species, and hopefully coming out of this, it sounds like we may not grow any crop other than our dry hay that we've ever grown before. So thanks for helping walk me through it.
Well, I think, there's lots of options. Some of us in different parts of the province have been in what you may term as a more serious drought than others. Some have been a 2-year span, and parts of the province we've seen, coming into our 6th year. And there's nobody more resilient than ag producers, and you work with them as well, David, as a dealer of DSV-Northstar, and I think that's important. It's comfortable to stay in the crops that we typically are accustomed to, but
our comfort zones.
The comfort zone for sure, but it takes something to walk out of there and look at different opportunities. And you mentioned it as we looked at the drought. There's certain varieties that are or certain species that are gonna use less water, and that's important during the time of water restrictions, for example, under irrigation. And definitely, you have to have a management plan to work through drought. Last couple of years, we get some calls, and I'm sure you've got them too, indicating that, the only thing that's green on our native range is the deep tap-rooted products, like a legume, and that speaks to soil health. It speaks to maybe having us in agriculture revisit what we're actually doing for varieties, for example, on tame forage. And then, we step out further and look to really what's going to improve the bottom line, and that's most important. And we're looking at some pressure on our commodity markets as we look to cereals and oilseeds. We know that forage for the last number of years has been at the top of the line when you look at your profit sheet. So again, more and more interest in forage. You talk about carbon sequestration being so important. You talk about soil health, and so our goal as livestock and crop producers should be really to enhance the soil during periods of drought. That you alluded to. Getting water infiltration, improving the soil structure. That's
absolutely.
All part of our game.
Absolutely. Well, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So we are officially out of our comfort zone, diving into what I think is going to be a pretty darn exciting year. And
yeah, we look at the options, and you might have, and producers might have some of their neighbors talking about them and saying, man, that guy has lost it. But when you look at some of the new crops that are an alternative, And especially as we speak about livestock, one of our biggest costs is the cost of our winter feed program.
Yes.
And so if we can extend grazing, if we can use byproduct crops, if we can talk about intercropping that we'll talk about here a little later on, those are all options. They're all avenues that are going to improve our bottom line, and that's really what we're here for.
Absolutely. Nobody wants to have a wreck, but at the same time, without any risk, there's a marginal reward. So the forage market's going to be strong this year. Obviously, we're in the forage business, so we need to pay real close attention to that. Cattle prices are doing well. Grain prices are a little down. So this is actually going to be the first year ever in my commercial farming history that we're not growing oats and barley in any of our crop rotation. So it speaks volumes to some of those varieties maybe not being as drought tolerant, but we need to do more with less. And you touched on it that water rights and let alone the dry land relying on Mother Nature, but some of these reservoirs are still almost empty, and we don't know how much snowpacks how much the snowpack's really gonna contribute to irrigation numbers and water allowances. So.
Yeah, the snowpack definitely has been improving. Today we're in the middle of March, and snowpack is one thing, but in terms of how it melts and comes down and feeds the river system, and then our reservoirs is another, right? So
That's right.
Aside from the snowpack, and it is growing, and we're happy about that, is what kind of a melt we're going to have. So
absolutely. So,
lots of variables. We're March, and as you go to planning, David, important to have plan A, B, and C, and I know all of us as producers work through that. When we're on the combine, we're thinking about what we're going to be doing the following year, and how
right.
we could do it better, and it's bottom line. It's all about profit, right?
It has to be, or we're not going to be here. And it's kind of funny, people joke about farmers being optimists and gamblers. You have to be both, because if you're not a gambler, well, pretty hard to be a farmer, because you're going to take your next year's salary and literally rely on the weather. And that can go both ways. So hopefully we don't have a wreck on the side of the highway and everyone's laughing at us.
No.
But there's a pretty darn good chance that we're going to succeed with this plan.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, it's okay to step out, and again, you're making those kind of considerations that you're not putting, the entire farm into something. You're stepping out, and you're looking at some different alternatives that we know that we're going to enhance the possibility of you having a good or having success with them. So, again, as we look to the different species, we're timing that for your harvest, and you've got some pretty unique equipment here that we'll talk about a little later on. You've got a new drill that's going to open up some opportunities for not only yourself but your neighbors.
100%.
In doing some custom work. So again, it's all about enhancing their productive ability on their own operations as well as yours.
Absolutely. Well, again, thanks for being here. It'd be good to touch on Northstar's part of this equation. Obviously, been a long time. You've been one of our favorite vendors since I was even a kid. I can remember my dad going to the Calgary warehouse for seed, even in the mid '90s. That's about as far as I can remember. Visiting the Northstar facility back when it was in Calgary, and so you guys have been a favorite vendor of ours for a long time, and ever since I started commercially farming on my own, you guys have been a pretty integral part of what we're doing. So thank you for doing that, and thanks for being a part of this. Some of these topics we're going to discuss here are exciting, and how we're going to use some of the equipment, like you say, the new drill, but this silage equipment. So we're going to start to make our crop rotations a little more profitable and drought tolerant.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background, and thanks again for those comments related to Northstar. A couple of years ago, we got together with DSV, which is a European company, and they've since purchased our company, and we've joined forces as DSV-Northstar. We like where we came from. We've been very diligent in bringing varieties to our customers, and you as a dealer, that we know are going to work within the environment of Western Canada. With our with joining forces with DSV, they bring a lot of research and some of the aspects of agriculture that are kind of growing in Canada to speak. You know, Europe kind of leads the way in a lot of ways, and so we're pretty excited about the genetics they bring, the research, the breeding program that's so strong, and the number of employees that go with that in bringing those varieties to us. So
that's a huge amount of support.
Huge amount of support, and we know that that we can market them with confidence, and we can make them work in our operations. So yeah, Northstar is you know, a full legume selection, a full forage grass selection, the turf grass market. Of course, we play in the reclamation market, which is also very important. As you alluded to, a lot of stock blends. You know, we don't have pages and pages of them, but our focus really at Northstar is, as with you, with dealers, and myself as an agrologist, to be sure that we bring the right blend or the right combination of products to our customers. So a large part of our business, David, is really custom blends, and you've been a part of that as well, as you manufacture those for your customers.
Well, we gravitate to you guys for that very reason, because some of these other companies, it's hard to get custom blends. If I don't want a specific alfalfa that's in a blend, if I want a saline tolerant or alkaline resistant, you know, or all these different alfalfas or legumes, if I want to tailor one of the species in a blend, it's an easy button with you guys. You guys just say, well, this one's a good recommendation for that soil pH or what have you, or a hay version versus a silage variety, which again, we're going to play with some silage varieties this year.
Yeah, and I'm excited about that. And I agree. I mean, as a company puts a stock blend together, they're basically, you know, indicating that it'll work in Virden, Manitoba and Fort St. John, BC. And we know that there's a lot of different environmental factors that go into play, different soil types, different undulation, topography. So important to plan and set up a custom blend that's gonna meet your requirements, whether you're looking for 3 cuts of hay or you're looking for more grass in a mix or less grass. That's all about how we work in terms of making sure that our customer is most successful.
Absolutely, and we appreciate that. We see it, so thank you for that. Our hay varieties typically involve the standard, you know, some alfalfa, timothy, brome, orchard grass, and some fescues. You guys have been really good at being able to tell us with our growing season and soil pHs and soil types which varieties play nice together for our soils, and that's been a very noticeable thing. So when you look at doing custom blends, it's not intimidating to be custom. I'd actually be more intimidated to go with stock blends. So you guys tailor very well to that.
Yeah, and I mean, the success alone, we know that when we put a blend together, it's going to work for that customer based on what their end goals or their end requirements are. I'm less comfortable with a stock blend because there are that many variables with it. So
yeah, where's
custom
it going?
blends, they're the answer, and you know, I think the success has kind of spelled itself out in the field with the custom end.
100%. And you guys got the custom blending down to a science. You guys are quick and fast and provide a lot of value there. So from there, I'm itching to start talking about some of these ones that we want to get our hands on.
Well, why don't we switch into that then? Tell me what you're thinking for this year, David.
Well, the drought tolerance is priority one. We have a 90-day growing season, as you know. You know our area pretty well here in the hills. We've got some of the province's best topsoil, but we only have 90 days, and that soil stays pretty cold. So, you know, we'll be using our new Northstar soil thermometer this spring to see when it warms up. But we want to try some different stuff. Like I say, we're not going to try oats or barley this year at all. We're not going to grow oats or barley this year at all. We have room outside of our dry hay, which is kind of the status quo. We've got 3 things that we want to dabble in. We want to try and expand our offering on triticales, both spring and fall. We have a bunch of fall that's in already. We probably should have put more in because it really took off last fall. And if we can harvest that by by the end of June, willing we have enough water to do it, we have time to dabble in some dual cropping. Dual cropping for our area is unheard of. It doesn't really happen here. And with all these new varieties and early maturing crops, I'd like to try it. If I fall on my face, that's fine. There's only 10 million people watching. So, and a lot of people going down the highway. So if they see my crop not doing that well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I want to try it. And if we can succeed in some double cropping, I want to speak with you about some alfalfas and some sorghum Sudan that DSV offers.
Yeah, just on that thought process alone, you know that you're going to get one crop using something like fall triticale, so you're going to get a harvest. The root system is being developed. The plant went into fall in great shape. It was vernalized over the winter period, and now it's going to go into the reproductive stage once soil conditions warm up enough that it's going to start to rock and roll.
I should jump in right there real quick because that's funny. Fall triticale isn't typically grown here. It's growing a little bit further south, not too far. But everyone was asking last fall, what is that you planted in a couple of those fields? Because it was so neon green. After we planted it, we actually got some snow on it. And it germinated and it grew 6-7 inches before the ground froze, and it was neon green. That stuff had some crazy good vigor and color to it, and it was the only green thing in the countryside around here. So hopefully we're off to the races here in another month.
Well, for sure. I mean, that just speaks to the health of that plant as it goes into the winter period, right? And as I said, in order for that plant to become reproductive and set seed, it has to be vernalized, and that occurs over the winter period. So now we're off to the races. You've got a crop the root system is developed. Now it's just a matter of making sure the fertility is there in case you have to top dress to guarantee yourself a pretty good stand. Typically in this part of the world, we do get some spring moisture.
Yes.
It's our fall or our midsummer that often is an issue. But so you're going to capitalize on all that spring moisture that is projected to be here. And land up with a crop. You talked about double cropping. In parts of the province, we're more successful than others. If we've got an extended frost-free period, where I'm at, Medicine Hat, double cropping works fine. But I think what's important is even if we happen to dry out and you get another crop seeded in there, think about what we're doing for the soil health. Think about having a living root within that soil structure. Even if we do run into a drought period midway through the summer and going into fall, we still have something actively that's holding and binding that soil and improving on the soil structure.
Yeah, we got our one crop, and if we had a wreck of a year, essentially we're just cover cropping. We're going to call our second crop a cover crop. It's holding the soil in place from erosion and
I mean, you were really exposed to that. You attended a largest trade show in Germany, Agritechnica.
Oh, yeah.
I think, you learned and brought back some stuff from there as well, and I know you shared some stuff with me, but, Europe, they have to keep something growing.
It's illegal not to have something growing in your soil, so Italian ryegrass is everywhere throughout the winter.
Yeah.
It's probably the most common cover crop.
Now, they do have some more moisture. It's a different moisture regime than
100%.
what we have, but it's pretty cool to think about how important that is and the attention they're paying to soil health.
It's huge, and it's mandatory. It's very legislated, and obviously they're having some problems over there with legislation right now, and I hope that they can all come out ahead and get it all figured out for everybody's best interest. But for us, the triticale, the fall triticale that's in, we're hoping to get a second crop on it. And if the summer's looking really dry and we are starting to look at dollars and cents to say, I don't think there's enough groundwater to sustain a second crop, we could throw something again like that Italian annual rye just to get something easy to germinate, to make the field green and fuzzy and hold that soil. So for our fall triticale, I guess we're off to the races already because it's already in the ground. Again, our nutrient package, we've already thrown a pretty heavy dose of PK&S biofertilizer from Replenish on there. So our PK&S is really good. We just actually got our soil tests back the other day. I was speaking with our agronomist this morning about it. We are going to have to top dress a little bit of nitrogen, but we're actually doing pretty good because there wasn't much yield in 2024. So the nutrient packages that were put on in 24, there's a lot of residual. Would you recommend, if we are going to have a prolific rain in July and we have the Triticale off already, is that a field, or are those fields a candidate for something like a sorghum Sudan?
Yeah, providing we come off early enough, David. We'll talk a little more about sorghum Sudan. But definitely sorghum Sudan is a warm season crop.
Yes.
And it really flourishes, when that soil temp is in that range of, 15 degrees, which it will be at that time. So again, as you go to crop planting, you have to be sure that you leave your options open. I mean, if this fall Triticale, if we get a great spring and we get a good start, very likely you'll be off in the first week of July. You're going to be using your new Krone silage baler to get that done. And so that, again, when you think about harvest loss, you think about harvest efficiency, doing a silage bale is outstanding in that, A, you eliminate your harvest losses, and B, you cut the number of days that swath is laying in the field, which allows you to go in and pick up probably 4 to 8 days, maybe even 10 days in terms of planting another crop.
And that's one of 4 or 5 pretty big factors of why we had to buy the new drill, is we needed more capacity and speed, because the second that field is harvested, a fast track is going to be getting hooked up to that drill, and it's going to be sitting at the corner of the field waiting to get in there, because we need to take advantage of those few days. As everyone knows, we don't have any extra time in a 90-day growing season. We're going to be trying to pull off miracles as it is, and a fast growing crop, even if we got a half crop of sorghum Sudan, not only would that accomplish a cover cropping element, but there's enough to harvest even with a half crop, because, correct me if I'm wrong, a sorghum Sudan can grow close to 10 feet tall.
Yeah, it can, for sure.
Under irrigated in perfect conditions.
Yeah, and that's full season, but so long as we got 3 feet of growth, it'd be substantial in terms of the amount of forage and biomass that would produce. And aside from your operation, as we look to other customers, if they're to get into that kind of a program and they take their silage off in July, and even if they don't utilize the second crop with some form of harvest, cows play in a really important role in nutrient cycling just for the fall grazing.
Yeah. Swath graze it, or just send them right into it?
There's all kind of opportunities, and it's just utilizing our ground and looking after the soil health and building on that.
100%. That's priority number one. Is looking after the land and being a good steward of the land, which we would accomplish that. Priority number 2, which some guys argue would be number 1, but it's technically number 2, is we need to be profitable, or else we can't afford to be here.
Right.
And if we're in the forage game, the sorghum Sudan and a lot of these different cover crop options or dual cropping options have some pretty high potency feed values. So even as a swath grazing or harvest silage situation, if we're looking to get a single cut of, let's say a 4 foot or 3 half cut of sorghum Sudan grass, could we grow that in 45 days?
Yeah, basically when we look at sorghum Sudan, using a BMR type variety, you have less lignin in the stand.
So that means you can actually harvest it shorter?
No, we're still going to want to harvest at the right time, David. But as you said, if it's a half crop, if we've got over 2 or 2.5 feet of growth, there's a fair amount of forage there.
Would there be more than an oat or barley crop? There's a lot of biomass. The leaves are massive.
There is. It's and the quality is there. I mean, when you look at going in before the boot stage or right at the boot stage, you're probably looking at between 12 and 17% crude protein, a TDN that's going to rival in that 70% range. So very high quality feed. And I think one thing about sorghum Sudan versus corn, for example, is everybody's exactly the same. It's all leaf material with a bit of a smaller stem for sure on the BMR variety. So that's different than corn. Corn, you have to be very strategic in how you graze it because it does have the cob. So every bite is not the same because the cob is going to be different than the leaf area on a corn plant, which is also different than the big stalk you have, right? So with all of these crops, you have to manage them somewhat differently, but the opportunity is there for sure, like we talked about.
Okay. So what would you say? Let's say it's dry, we're having a wreck. Let's be devil's advocate here. We've harvested some fall triticale. We need to plant something else in there. The goal is to harvest something else as a cash crop. And what would you think would be the minimal height that we would need to aim for a sorghum Sudan harvest? Would that be in the 3-foot range, 30-inch, or?
Yeah, I would say you're probably correct there. And of course, that's very dependent on the days that we have from the time that this crone baler rolls out of that field, right? And you're in there with your new drill putting a sorghum Sudan down. I think what's has scared some people in regards to sorghum Sudan is the fact that if it's less than 18 inches or basically 2 feet is what we usually say, it does run the risk of having some prussic acid.
Just because it's a juvenile plant?
It is, and it's a plant that does collect prussic acid, which can be kind of lethal to cattle. So again, you have to manage that. If in fact that is the case, you need to let it freeze down, wait 10 days, and then go in. If you get the kind of height that's going to exceed 2 feet, then that risk is reduced.
Well, once that root's established, people talk about being able to watch sorghum Sudan grow. It grows so darn fast. It just takes a little bit of time to get that root started. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, it starts quick, and it really takes off when it hits that 6 to 7 leaf stage. It just, you can watch it grow. So lots of opportunity. Sorghum Sudan likes heat.
Okay.
And so in a drought period, it's also one of the only plants that during extreme drought can actually shut down, and when you get moisture, it'll come back to life and continue on, which is different than any other plant.
So she comes off high idle and just
Goes right to grow, and it's like I said,
Nice.
it really does like heat. Moisture helps as well, but it's something that really gets pretty wild when the heat hits it.
Well, perfect. So it sounds like our fall triticale program, sorghum Sudan would be an option, depending on what weather is looking like for the rest of the summer. We will consider sorghum Sudan a decent option for early July planting, knowing that we may only get a half crop out of it. But while we're on the sorghum Sudan topic, let's discuss sorghum Sudan as a seeded in May 2024 crop in potentially 2 cuttings.
Yeah.
So obviously, you need if you're going for 2 cuts, you need as much time as possible. But we need to cut it at a higher height so that the regrowth boots back a little bit.
Right. Sorghum Sudan is a unique plant. It's a warm season crop, much like millet is. So again, we look for soil temps to be 10 degrees or a little stronger. So you're probably looking at that 3rd week of May. Again, depends very much how our spring goes. Again, back to the thermometer. I don't think we need to get away from dates and look more at the agronomics in terms of when it's right
Temperatures,
to get that done. And you alluded to that on the temperature side. So for sure, put it in. Under dryland conditions, we look to about 18 or 25 pounds an acre is probably the optimal seeding rate. Sorghum can be put in to about 1.5 inches. Here's an example of some sorghum I brought here, David. Sorghum Sudan. It's a fairly large seed, about 20,000 seeds per pound. So we'll seed that, as I indicated, in that 18 to 25 pounds per acre range.
Sorry, how many pounds?
20,000 seeds
20,000 seeds per pound.
Per
Okay.
pound, yeah. So we get that in. Sorghum is somewhat unique. There's not a lot of chemistry around for weed control, so we want to start with a fairly clean field, as we do with any crop. So maybe a glyphosate burn off to start with. Make sure it's good and clean in terms of no weed pressure. We go in with the warm season crop like sorghum Sudan. It's a pretty unique plant in that it has an extensive root system. And I guess that speaks to its drought tolerance for sure. But the other thing is with sorghum Sudan, the roots actually give out an exudate, and that actually inhibits weeds from growing, and so there's definitely an advantage there for sure, and it's being noted, like Virginia University, for example, has noted that after day 5, those roots are starting to give off some of that exudate already. So
That's quick.
and the other thing that you'll see with sorghum Sudan is it gets so leafy that it does inhibit, especially on a very dense seeded stand, it does inhibit the root growth from happening, or the weed growth.
Well, it creates a canopy, its own little ecosystem under there. Versus corn stays taller and lean a little longer before it really starts
before it
creating
actually shades it and covers. So there are some advantages for sure to sorghum Sudan. Now, when we look at the hybrids, like the BMR, you're going to look to cutting ideally for the best protein and energy value to be cutting right about that boot stage. So that's really right about day 60.
60 days? Well, we have 90, so hey, that might fit.
And you know, as we go to cutting and we're quick off the field, we know that, for example, if we have 30 or 40 days left, that's also the period of time that we've had the greatest heat within our environment here.
Yes.
At Okotoks. So, you know, that sorghum Sudan is really going to get up and dance once it's cut. Now, you mentioned cutting height. As with any grass, it takes grass or leaf area to create growth, because that is the photosynthetic solar panel, so to speak. So try not to cut, David, any less than 5 inches, and so in that 5-6 inch range. We get that first crop off, it's got a great opportunity to flush up and get on to the second end. So
yeah, we've been working with Noble Equipment on our skid shoes. We're gonna play this year with some extended height. We have kind of a universal size skid shoe on our triple mowers, and we're going to play with some extended height mowers because the 5-inch height, which is at the max of our current shoe. So we're going to play around with, can we bump that up at all, or try to get an extended shoe, which is actually, there's one sitting in the passenger seat of my truck right now.
The other thing too with sorghum Sudan is if you cut it that high, sorghum Sudan has got a lot of water, a lot of moisture in it, right? And so if you cut it a little higher, the chances of it wilting down and drying down are better than if you were to shave that ground, right? And just lay it on some ground. It's a massive swath. There's a pile of biomass coming out of that swather as you go to cutting it. So if you can keep it off the ground, get some air movement through.
Keep that stubble high. So that's a good point though. Our triple mowers, we're going to be cutting this with triple mowers.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can, we've already talked to Crone about it, about how to swath it, or how to form a swath. And it's really a non-issue. We're going to condition it with our tines very gently because of the sheer quantity of material going through.
Yeah.
But what kind of conditioning does it really need? Because
well, the thing that prevents sorghum Sudan from really drying down quickly is the leaf. If you notice, will have a bit of a waxy surface to it. So it does, like Italian annual rye, it does slow that drying process down, and it's one way in which that plant doesn't transpire as much during drought areas or drought periods because it does have that waxy surface.
So what works with you during growing season is going to work slightly against you as you harvest it, but
it does,
with the right conditioning, we can.
Yeah. So you know, we talked about fall triticale or spring triticale, doing a bale harvest on it as a silage bale. A bit of an advantage again with the silage bale for sorghum Sudan is you don't have to squeeze the last bit of moisture out. Okay, you're going to be putting your bale up, your silage bale at 40%, 45. So your will time is going to be reduced, but we need to be sure and that you're prepared that after you go ahead and make the cut, we're probably going to be looking at probably a 48-hour wilt time.
Okay.
Just
so
to bring that moisture
for a 5-foot-high swath, right? It's gonna.
Yep. There's a pile.
Could you
of
imagine?
there.
We're gonna wear the paint off of every square inch of those triples.
I think you will. For sure.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah,
Have
it
to
is.
buy a couple extra rattle cans at the end of the year just to get the green back. So
And I think the important part is the value of the feed that you're presenting to your livestock is very high quality.
And again, we're cash cropping something like that product, so it has to be profitable. And just to kind of correct me if I'm wrong, I've never grown it before. I've watched a pile of videos on it and read a lot of articles on it, and it's very popular everywhere else in the world for some reason, except for right here. And when you speak to agronomists about it outside of yourself, obviously you're a subject matter expert, but you talk to other agronomists, there's really not a lot of data on it. And there's that skepticism of why to do it, but nobody's really tried it. And if it were to work, we could actually be faced with a problem that would be a good one and a unique one, but we could almost have too much forage that we can handle. If we had a prolific growth and all of a sudden this stuff grew to 9 foot tall before we could cut it, we're going to be maybe needing a bigger tractor or more of them to get this material harvested in time.
Well, if you let sorghum Sudan go to that stage, definitely that volume is there. But I think you being a good manager, we're gonna aim for that 60-day cut in the boot stage. As that plant matures, as with any plant, with maturity comes a drop in nutritive value.
Yes.
And so the most important thing to do, given the equipment you have, and our aim is to put up the most high quality feed you can have. We want a feed quality that's going to be close to 160, 180. And it's not hard to see sorghum Sudan with a relative feed quality, ranging in that 150 to 160. So I think it's important. I think the other thing that's really important is when you look at sorghum Sudan, the palatability is second to none. If you're talking about weaning calves, if you're talking about yearling gains, sorghum Sudan, it's extremely palatable. It's a high sugar content. So it's a desirable part of a ration for any livestock program. So
that's exciting. But what's the elephant in the room? The elephant in the room is this all sounds too good to be true.
Well, it's weather dependent for sure.
Weather dependent. Money doesn't buy you a crop.
Yeah, and I think, we're dealing with maybe some tradition, and we are as we look to the different cover crops. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I think we've experimented and we've done it with success, using our cover crops to our advantage. And I think, we're a fairly traditional livestock type business, or many have that kind of business plan. That,
like you're talking agriculture in general in our area?
We're pretty used to some traditional
status
crops,
quo,
right?
Yeah.
And we know
oats and barley.
We're comfortable with it. We know that we're probably not going to have a wreck. They're also insurable under Alberta Farm or AFSC, and so we're comfortable growing that, and that's what we do. In order to step out of the box and make some changes, you have to look at crops that are going to be better for you. Now, it's interesting that we're talking more on the forage side, but the number of producers that I visit with, even though they're in forage, they're diversified, they may be in crops. A strong number of questions this year about maybe we should be using more lentils, maybe we should be putting mustard in. These are crops that are kind of outside of this spectrum for some of our customers, but they're looking at it saying, yeah, maybe we ought to look, maybe peas are an option, right?
Okay.
Deep-rooted as well. So even aside from the forage side, we're seeing the crop side also look at, hey, how can we utilize the moisture that we currently get, whether it's 3 inches for the growing season, as it has been the last number of years.
Unfortunately, yeah.
What are some of the things we can do to maybe enhance that bottom line and
fix some nitrogen.
Yeah, and when you look at the crop projections in terms of price, today canola's at $13.50 a bushel. And a year ago off the combine we were at 18.
18, 19 bucks.
And before that we were in excess of 20. So those things all come to play, and as you know, Input costs have not fallen.
Equipment costs have skyrocketed. There's certain companies doing better than others, but it's a roller coaster ride on that input cost side,
Yeah.
for sure. Fertilizers almost as volatile as it's ever been right now.
I mean, you're in the custom business as well, so I think it's important to be able to diversify your crops as well, and be sure that everything isn't coming off at a harvest stage that's going to hit all at once. So
Correct.
this does offer you some flexibility. You talked about silage for alfalfa. I mean, we've done that for years. We do have a great variety called Perfection, which has the stand fast trait, which means that it's very quick to start its growth after it's cut. And it's a variety that is for the good managers. And if you're gonna utilize a silage opportunity, it's a variety for you. For those that look at a dry forage kind of base, variety like Perfection might not be the fit, because it does get to growing so quick after it's cut. 2 days after it's cut, it's growing.
Well, we should order another baler and maybe have two in the field, because like the stats I've seen on Perfection alfalfa, like that stuff's growing through the swath in the next couple days after you cut it. So if you have it swath, you're seeing some leaf growth come back in what, a couple days? Am I wrong?
A couple days, it's starting to roll back.
If you have the moisture, obviously.
Yeah, and definitely, if you're looking at a dry hay type of scenario and that forage is laying in the swath for 4 to 6 to 8 days, it's too long.
Yeah, you couldn't put up Perfection
No.
dry. So that's a wet product with, again, high protein and TDN numbers.
Well, and just the fact that you have no harvest losses when you're going through a baler like the Krone. I mean, you're putting it up at 40 or 45% moisture. You don't have the field losses. You're retaining all the leaves that are on that plant.
Yeah.
And it has a high leaf to stem ratio, and that brings that protein value up. Should not be any trouble at all cutting in that bud stage and hitting that protein value at 18 to 22%.
Perfect. And obviously we've never grown those alfalfas before, but we know we can handle alfalfa. We know we can dial in our equipment to alfalfa pretty easily. You hit the nail on the head. My biggest concern is if we have too much alfalfa in that is getting 2 cuts, because we are very confident that we could get 2 cuts of Perfection in this area. Actually, our blend would have maybe 10% of another variety in there,
Yep.
but nevertheless, 2 cuts of something. We actually, in a perfect season, need to be cognizant of not having everything ready at the same time, because if we have 400 acres already in 3 different fields already at the same time, we're phoning our salesman to say we need some equipment. Maybe we should edit that part out of this video, because my phone's going to start ringing here. See another baler, do you?
Yeah.
No, we're good. But we just have to manage it. And I think you had alluded to that earlier, that if we can manage our cuttings on a not just an alfalfa basis, but on our Triticale and Sorghum. So if you don't mind, maybe for our viewers, I'll kind of bounce back to why our crop rotation is trending to this conversation is, and correct me if I'm wrong and if I'm not reiterating some of our discussions accurately, but we need to make money on our crop rotations, or we can't afford to stay in business. So the areas outside of dry hay that we have in crop rotation in 2024 are going to be our 2 different Triticales, spring and fall, mixed with some Sorghum Sudan and some silage varieties of alfalfa. So you and I have had lots of conversations lately about if we have all 3 of these crop rotations balanced in a perfect way, hopefully not everything's ready at the same time, and we have kind of an even workload throughout the summer. If we put everything into silage alfalfa, we're going to need more equipment, and we can't justify that. Like farms, you can't, as a business owner, manager, or entrepreneur, anything, you got to structure your business to say, well, I can't be overloaded on the harvest side and then have no seeding support or any other harvest activity support. So I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, that those 3 silage options within our crop rotation should play nicely together in different fields.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, it just, I think as ag producers, we have to get away from thinking about some dates and more so thinking about the agronomic side of the crops that we're growing and making sure that we're harvesting at the correct stage. And so it's easy with an alfalfa to say, well, it's only in the bud stage, I've got 10 days or I've got 12 days to get this done, but really you're giving up quality. And so you really need to be focused on the agronomic side. And as you said, with 3 crops like that, we know that your Triticale is coming off first, or the silage is going to come off first on the alfalfa, then your Triticale, then your Sorghum Sudan, then you're back to your second cut on your
Hopefully second cuts.
on the perfection, right? So again, cutting, and it's going to be, you know, traditionally in this area, we don't start cutting hay till July 1. And with this perfection, if the spring goes good and we get the moisture, you're going to be in there in probably that 3rd week of June.
Okay, perfect. So on a brand new seeding of perfection or a silage variety of alfalfa, how fast is it going to take? Our germination around here on alfalfa is very quick. We get good germination here. But do you think that first cut is going to be a thin cut, or should I let it get to absolute full maturity to help that root stay in place for a second cut? Or do I try to harvest it at 10% bud?
Well, I think you've been employing the method of using some Italian annual rye or annual ryegrass in for your establishment, and I think that's important. So a lot will let that crop grow, and you'll probably be doing a cut in August, and it'll be a 1-cut system, and it typically will run, you know, in that 2-ton range per acre. And then again, because you have a shorter growing season here, a lot of producers will not take that second cut and let that plant really get established and flourish and go into the winter in a fairly good state.
Okay, so for the first year.
On the first year.
Only in the first year.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What ratio of ryegrass would you recommend would be a good companion level?
We usually use 10 to 12% within a stand. I know you and I have bounced around the idea of using perennial rye, and that again works as good. And you will have some perennial rye come back into the stand for next year, and possibly the 3rd year. So you'll have a blended product, which is more valuable to a cow-calf guy. They do like to have, a lot of guys like to have a little grass within the mix, and it does enhance the dry down.
So if you went to a perennial rye versus an annual, would you still stick around that 10%, or would you go a little higher?
No, I think I'd stay around 10. I mean, you're looking for, again, you go back to the ability of a legume to fix its own end. So, you know, we started the conversation, and I don't think we've ever left it, regarding the profit line, but if you can reduce your input costs, I think that's extremely important.
That's always a win-win, yeah. Okay, so between the alfalfas, I definitely want to lean towards a perennial rye in that blend versus just pure alfalfa. So a 10% perennial rye. Would you have more than one variety of rye, or just stick with?
No, I would just stay. I mean, you make a choice whether you want it in there to be 1 year, whether it be an Italian, or you want to go to a perennial that you're going to see for the next 2 or 3 years, right?
So that's what I mean, like a perennial. Are there multiple varieties?
Yeah, we do. We do have a couple different ones. We have one that's a little higher on the nutritive value, so it speaks to the quality, and it's called Tetrax. We do have another one that we've used a lot, and it's called Valerio, and both of those
Yes,
are
we've
great.
actually seeded Valerio in some of our dry hay mix.
Right, and it's a great variety as well. Maybe doesn't quite have the quality that Tetrax does, but again, both are great varieties, and I think what's important is really you're going after the high variety or the high nutritive value of the alfalfa, and making sure that you're cutting it at that time. So the perennial ryegrass is just a bonus, during the year of establishment, you're creating a bit of a microenvironment to protect that young alfalfa plant against the wind and so forth. But from that point on, it's really all about the alfalfa.
Okay.
So you're going to harvest for the alfalfa, not the perennial rye.
Perfect. So a perennial ryegrass, a perfection alfalfa, how much regrowth do you want to have on that plant in a minimum in future years, like years 2 or more? How much regrowth do you want on that plant prior to freeze? Because we get our frosts on average first week of September. So if
Yeah.
I am taking a second cut, I need to make sure that I have enough time to see some leaf come back. Because
Yeah.
how many cuts am I going to expect off of
Well,
perfection?
we've had 4 cuts, and we've had a guy in the very south actually take 5 cuts. But in this area, we're gearing for 2 cuts. First cut will be very much, or your second cut success is going to be very much dependent on your first cut. So if we do a good job on our first cut at that bud stage and go for the high quality, it's going to present ourselves with enough time to get a really good solid second cut, providing the moisture's there. Get that done and have enough time for that plant to regrow back and set the root system back up. So I believe we have enough time just because we have that opportunity to go in early, and it's got a very rapid regrowth, so it allows us to get a jump on a regular type alfalfa.
Okay, so we're short on time in August because we're on borrowed time. You get into that 3rd, 4th week. There's been snow in southern Alberta,
Yep, for sure.
which is just crazy to think. So as long as we can leave ourselves that time, would you hazard to guess that, we're very arid. There's not much humidity typically in August. Would we be harvesting that second cut within a day or two? Or how fast do you think in our conditions
Oh, yeah, for sure.
we'd
You
be
could probably
pulling that baler through?
because you're doing a silage baler, so for sure. And again, like I said, we play with the environment every day. That's part of our standard in agriculture. But if it looks like the weather is turned against us in the fall, and it's calling on a frost, then maybe we wait for a frost and cut the day after it freezes.
Just to put it to dormancy.
Yeah, if we've got ourselves in that type of position. But again, every year is going to be somewhat different. But the opportunity is there to be more successful with a stand-fast variety that is that quick, and they're using something like the Crone silage baler to get the harvest done.
Oh, those bales, I can just imagine how heavy those are going to be.
They are going to have some weight. But again, from the trucking standpoint, if I'm a purchaser and I'm buying that feed, I want to be sure that I'm getting a full payload.
Yes, well, trucking's not cheap, so let's max out a truck. And that was one of the most eye-opening experiences last year with those bales, is we dialed in our bale width to go down a road at close to full axle capacities and not be wide load. That was just mind-blowing, because typically we're 12-foot wide hay loads going down the road, or something close to that. And to be able to just actually utilize a truck for what it was worth and not be wide load and everything else that goes along hauling hay, it was kind of a unique experience that we learned last year for the first time. So, and
it's a change of mindset too, because when you have a customer that's looking to buy baled forage like this, that's higher moisture or bale silage, they automatically go to thinking, well, I'm paying for a lot of water going down the road. But when you think about it, the value of those bales and your ability to mix it off in a TMR, or total mixed ration, really ends up not being as expensive as you think it may be at first glance, because you're able to utilize some byproducts. You have very high quality feed to mix off with it. You've got some moisture to go along with it. And really you need to think about what that TMR ration is going to cost you. And I think most people will be pleasantly surprised if they were to do the math.
okay,
So it's a new thing.
it is a new thing,
Right.
yeah, and it's really perking a lot of people's interest, because bale processors versus just a bale truck and things like that. There's a lot of ways to feed product, but there's also a lot of ways to give you more options from the status quo. And we keep kind of going back to the status quo. And some of those TMRs, in a high hay price year, and you want yeah, maybe a producer has a lot of straw. He's into a mixed farm and he has a lot of straw, but he has no feed. Well, he could buy some high quality alfalfa or sorghum silage, blend her down with some straw and get a mixed ration.
Yeah, and I think that often we do things that are easy.
That's human nature for sure.
Just because it is that way. So if you think about it, David, I mean, you've got a beautiful baler here, but if you think about a dry baler, I swath that product, whether it's a green feed or a hay. I let it dry out. It usually takes, if it's green feed, 2 weeks, 10 days.
Oh, you're 10 days for sure.
Right, for
yeah.
sure. I then go to bale it. We often deal with very low humidity, as you indicated in this area. So every time we dump a baler or a bale coming out of that baler, we see a nice chunk of material left behind the bale.
And then about 3 weeks later, you see 10,000 green sprouts coming out of it.
Yeah, so you know what we're dropping there. So we do that. So we've given up some harvest losses in the field. We then take it home. We've got some harvest losses due to respiration in the stack, and that's probably 10 or 15%. We then let it sit over the winter period. We then hook on with a bale processor back up. The feed is at 15 or maybe 17% moisture.
At most, yeah.
And we grind it out in the field, and we see that cloud of green in behind us. And you know what that is?
What should be going in the mouths of those cattle or livestock.
Yeah, we just lost a pile of our leaf material there, which is, in essence, the high protein end of it, right?
Everything that you took all those precautions on to produce of high quality back in July and August are now in the middle of winter in a plume of dust over top of beautiful white snow.
So again, it speaks to the silage baler and the purchasing of silage bales and being able to utilize that in the TMR and save all of that high quality feed, but it's not meant for everybody.
No.
Right.
No, and we know that. And
so if your strategy fits with the way you've been operating and your bottom line says that's okay to do it, that's fine. Right. But there are ways to make improvement. They do come with a cost, but I think you got to pencil as we do each and every day.
Well, I've been phoning around everybody I know in the forage industry and friends and family. I've been asking everybody some of the same questions we've been talking about, maybe just not as in depth. But, and one good buddy told me something, and I thought that was the best response I think I've ever heard. No offense to you, Brian, it didn't come from you, but listen to this response. He says, well, are you trying to hit home runs or are you trying to bunt the ball to get to first base? And it's like, well, you got to get around and come back to home. I'm trying to hit home runs. I'm not going to set my sights up on an incremental step. Like, I'm doing this to try and survive and have a business and feed my family and have a justifiable business and farm. Yep. And I'm gonna put my neck out there a little bit on some different stuff. And you know what? There's only 10 million people watching, and if they see me fail, well, that's going to be a pretty funny video.
Well, you've got to try to succeed, all right? You have to try new things. I mean, just to switch up a little bit. I mean, I'm really kind of intrigued with your latest purchase, and that is your new drill. But before you tell me about that drill, it does have the opportunity that I know that we've talked about to be able to intercrop. And I think we've learned something as we got into the cover crop business, David, and that is when we blend all of the seeds together and put them in the same row, we're not as effective as we are if we can band a cover crop type material in between our cereal rows. And I refer to that as intercropping. And I think your new machine is going to have that ability. And I know you and I have talked about, even in the case of a product like Sorghum Sudan or maybe even spring Triticale, how about the opportunity to put in a cover crop in every other row?
100%, I'm all for it. We haven't even scratched the surface on intercropping, and if we go this conversation, we might be here for 3 days, and I'm all for it. But as you remember, I ran a lot of drills by you, and I don't mean to put the pressure on you, but I ran a lot of different ideas by you, and the cover cropping was an area of just this massive opportunity that was available to us. And we've discussed that on the Sorghum Sudan spacing. The new horse drill that we're getting is a 6.5 inch spacing. And well, that's too tight to just plant Sorghum Sudan. So we're actually gonna plant Sorghum Sudan in per your recommendation, every second row. So we'll have Sorghum Sudan on a 13 inch spacing, and we've been playing with some intercropping options, and it sounds like we're probably gonna go to like an Italian annual rye in between each furrow. So in theory, we have very good companion crops, but we talked earlier about the canopy and weed resistance, or competitiveness against weeds. I feel like we're swinging hard enough to hit a home run on that. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean, if we happen to get some moisture and we're not in as severe a drought as we've experienced in the last 2 to 3 years in this area, I'm really looking forward to it. And I mean, intercropping is not something that you can go to the literature there and find what the right combo is going to be. It's a bit of an experimentation, but I know through corn, a lot of guys have done intercropping, and it's been very successful with cover crops, like Italian annual rye, things like hairy vetch, maybe some purple top turnip. There's all kind of things we can look at, but definitely just think about what that value brings in terms of upping your crude protein level.
Absolutely. And harvest options. If we decide if the second cut isn't worth harvesting, look at the forage and biomass that we could send cattle or a livestock herd into that field and let them root around for some turnips.
Absolutely. I mean, just a nutrient cycling. But we always come back to livestock, and that's because we're part of it. But even from the soil health perspective, if you're not part of that livestock game, after that crop is up, you've still got something living within those rows. And between the row spacings, you don't have all that open soil that's going to be subject to the temperatures.
That's right.
Either you've got something that's there, it's shading that soil surface, keeping it a little cooler, and you've got an active root that's growing.
Absolutely. So that drill is going to tailor, I think, perfect. That's why, again, we went with the horse, is we think it's going to tailor into giving us that huge plethora of options for some intercropping.
The other thing that I was really excited about when we talked about it is the 6.5 inch row spacing is one, but secondly, your ability to go in and put spring triticale down at 1.5 inches, and the next row, which will be a cover crop, at 1/4 to 1/2 inch.
Yes, and we have plans to do that with some red clover as well. So one of our spring triticale fields, 13 inch spacing on the spring triticale and 13 inch in between of some clover, which that legume is going to help build up that soil, but also give it that biomass and a mixed ration going into the baler for either green feed or silage.
Yeah, super excited about it. I think, some people have started into that intercropping, but the drill that you're waiting on now, that'll be here in the spring.
I heard she just hit the port.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
So it's westbound.
Yeah, I think
She's setting sail.
the options there are unlimited in terms of what you can do when it comes to intercropping, for sure. Especially with the precision that you told me about, that this drill is going to offer us, right?
And we'll have 3 tanks on it. So if we could get pretty clever or sophisticated, I should say, on the metering. We don't need to get into that too much, but it's just nice knowing that the drill has options and we're not going to be handcuffed. I feel, that drill isn't something we're going to grow out of very quickly. And we know the single disc work good for us here, so there's really no harm or foul or risk.
And how about the drill in terms of speed of seeding? I think that's something that's different than what we're accustomed to, right?
Well, we have fast tractors, like fast tracks, and we're not always able to pull some other drills as fast as we would like them, and Horsch's claim to fame is some speed. This one being dual gang, 6.5 inch spacing. We are going to have to watch that the second gang isn't plowing under the first if we get excessive speed, but there's no reason, well, the manufacturer even says, Horsch says that we should be able to hit 15 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
So 9 mile an hour
Yeah, when
as a
normally,
top range, that is
Yeah.
cooking along.
I mean,
So
normally we see it at 4, right? 4 and
And-
5, and
I'm not saying that's going to happen all the time, but there might be the odd situation and condition where we're capable of doing that. We have the tractor to drive that fast without being bounced out through the roof. The drill can do it, so we know we can work backwards from there. And at 26 foot, at 9 mile an hour, you just said if traditionally guys are pulling 50, 60 foot drills at 4,
yeah.
and this drill's 26 foot wide and we're traveling twice the speed, people kind of laugh when I say about a 26 foot drill.
Yeah,
And we're actually at the same acres an hour
right. With more precision,
with more precision.
right. And I think that's the key part, is just the ability to be flexible and offer, that precision planning with different varieties at the same time. I mean, just think about the time saving. I mean, what happens if, for example, you want to seed sorghum that has a huge seed size, and sorghum can't be put in with alfalfa together because you do have the separation issues, right? So talk about a great deal, sorghum in one row and alfalfa in the other. I mean,
I couldn't agree with you more.
Right?
And I look at this little vial here. Obviously, I've never seeded sorghum before. These cameras may not pick it up, but very nice round seeds. There is going to be zero metering problem here. I know we fought with metering of different fine grasses. Brome grass is one that typically is a little harder to feed in a drill. There is zero issue here. It's bigger than canola, obviously, but it's very round. This is going to meter to, I'm sure, an insane accuracy through the metering system. This is.
But I mean, that drill has the ability, even if you're using, a cover crop mix where you have, a variance in size, you're still going to be able to be very precise with that drill.
There's some exciting times ahead. I'm very excited. I just hope there's no delays in shipping. Because of a lot of variables in our lives and operation in our farm and everything right down to cash flow, we couldn't order that drill early enough, unfortunately, and it's just going to be here in the nick of time. So hopefully all our viewers can also cross the fingers and hope it gets here on time, because we got a lot of work to do, not only on our farm in stuff that we're going to be seeding twice, but on the custom side. We got a pile of acres and a pile of people that are waiting on that drill too.
Good.
So we're all in this together, and
Well, I'm excited for where this is going to take you, and I mean, it's not only the drill, it's the ability to follow up and do the next step, and that's the silage bale,
absolutely.
and enhance, the ability to look for a double crop or a second crop, and just the ability to put up quality forage. So
Well,
I'm pretty excited about it, David. We can go on here for hours, but we've covered a lot of stuff, and it looks to me like you've got a plan.
Well, I hope so, and thanks for being a part of it. And hopefully our viewers can enjoy this video, learn something. I'm learning lots. I'm on the verge of information overload, it seems like, here in the last couple of weeks on some of these topics. But if this is the type of stuff you guys want to see as well, if you want us to get even more technical, I know some of it gets pretty deep pretty quick. There's a lot of varieties and species to talk about. It's pretty crazy to think that if we're taking on 3 in 1 year, well, what other crazy ideas are we going to have in the next couple of years once all this starts working? Let's hope for the day that our crop rotations are more profitable than the dry hay, or as profitable.
And I know
let's
that
hit a home run.
We talked earlier, David. I think this is kind of the prelude to maybe a fall or a midsummer video or YouTube that you can actually see what we've done here and have a look and say, well, I mean, you can't. There's always going to be changes we're going to make, but maybe we should have seeded something different in there in terms of the cover crop. Maybe we should have added some hairy vetch, or maybe some Persian clover.
Sure.
Or maybe some crimson clover. So, I think as we follow through your program, it's going to be a great asset as to how you make recommendations to your customers on behalf of DSV-Northstar as a dealer.
Well, that'd be great. And let us know, guys, if you guys want to see some more crop scouting videos and kind of follow us along on how some of these projects are coming through the summer. Obviously, you guys are probably going to see some of the highlights and the lowlights if things fail or go really well. But we can definitely, upon your guys' request, if you want us to get more technical on this stuff, or if you guys want us to show you more of the crop scouting and following these projects along, we're more than happy to make the content. And I hope maybe I could persuade you to come out this way and scout some fields with me, because some of this is new to me. So
yeah, no, would love to do it.
Yeah, Brian, it's really tall and green, but
yeah, I know.
How am I going to harvest 10 ton to the acre, Brian? I have no idea. What did you sell me?
we always like pictures, but there's really nothing better than standing in the middle of that field and looking at what we've accomplished.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's great. Well, thanks for making the trip, Brian.
Well, thanks very much, David, and I look forward to working with you. And I know you and I chat, in the midst of the season, probably once or twice a day, but I always look forward to our discussions. You do a lot of research, do a lot of reading, and you always come forth with some brilliant questions, and I do appreciate that.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm happy to have you on our side. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, David.